Last week, Donald Trump went to the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. It was 3 hours of something to behold. Whether you liked Donald Trump or you don't like Donald Trump really isn't the issue. It's about the changing media landscape. And some of the effects that it's having might be looking like this. This is the poly market, where people actually bet real cold, hard cash on who they think is going to be the next president. Not only here in the national popular vote, with Donald Trump at a commanding 66+% of all favorability in the betting markets compared to Kamala Harris at just shy of 34. But if we go down here, look at the swing states: Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Donald Trump, all with very commanding leads insofar as the betting. Again, these are not regular polls, and I want to stress that, but the betting markets have been a very interesting telltale sign since they've been around the last 25 to 30 years. But the question becomes, as we look at data like this, how is it being impacted? With a guy like Donald Trump appearing on the Joe Rogan podcast, well, maybe that gives us some clue, because, of course, Kamala Harris doesn't seem very interested in going on the Joe Rogan podcast. Even there is a cacophony of clamoring from her very supportive base. Yeah, the folks out there that really want to vote for her and see her win, whether you agree with those folks or not, doesn't matter. The question is, why is Kamala Harris not going on the Joe Rogan Experience? I think the speculation is pretty easy and also pretty sound. They can't afford to let her go on there and sit for 3 hours having an open conversation with somebody who will indeed grill her on certain topics. She has shown time and time again that she seems very ill-equipped to handle things on the fly at rally after rally. Usually these interviews have been cut short, even with major media personalities that are favorable to her, after just a few moments. Well, I don't think that they're going to put her on that show. But the point of this conversation is, look at the power that Joe Rogan Experience has in the national political landscape now. Probably at this point nearing 100 million views as I record this. This is bigger than basically anything else out there. The accessibility to it, the clips that are made from it and shared routinely, probably compounds that number to even hundreds of millions of more views. See, Donald Trump has always been a candidate that is about reaching the audience directly. He doesn't like to go through the traditional media because he knows the traditional media has a tendency to show extreme bias or outright lie. Just look at everything that's been said in the last few days since the Madison Square Garden rally that happened Sunday night. Yeah, Trump is a Nazi. It was a Nazi rally and all kind of other nonsense. It's turning most people off, but it seemed to suggest that, well, maybe if you're Kamala Harris and you have nowhere else to go and you're doing very poorly in the polls, the only thing you have left is fear, terror, scaring the hell out of the country. Don't vote for this person. He's a bad man. The problem is most people aren't buying it. And the real issue is what happens from here. What happens to the media landscape after the 2024 election? Because this is a conversation that might be beginning today, but it's certainly not going to end. And I hope to see you all election night. I may do a little bit of a brief live stream or video here on the channel, but I will more than likely be joining my friends over on Cobra Cast. That's right, Jeremy Griggs from Geeks and Gamers on the D-Day Cobra channel. Make sure to join us there for all the election night coverage. That's where I'm going to be tuning in for sure. But let's start this conversation, because this Joe Rogan thing is something to behold. Renegade Online.
This is out of New York Post. It's by Shane Galvin. Folks, we're not going to dive into politics here. However, what we are going to do is we're going to take a look at the ramifications of the ratings and what this means for YouTube, what it means for podcasts, and what it means for the future of news. And, news is sort of a subcategory of entertainment, if you think about it. A lot of people turn on the news because they want to have their viewpoints either validated or they're actually entertained by what's going on in the world. Otherwise, why would you watch the news? And so news organizations also are intricately intertwined with entertainment organizations. Many times, the news organizations are either owned by the entertainment company outright, such as ABC News being owned by Disney, or they're owned by parent companies that own both of them and they work hand in hand. All right, so let's take a look at this because I really do think that this is revolutionizing and perhaps permanently changing the landscape of news, of political campaigning and all of that. Let's talk about it. Here we go. Out of the New York Post by Shane Galvin, Trump's Rogan episode hits 20 million views in 20 hours on YouTube. And it's going to be more than that. We'll explain in just a moment. Trump's episode of the Joe Rogan Experience has now amassed over 20 million views on YouTube in 20 hours since its release, making it one of the most viral episodes in the popular podcast's history. The episode's massive viewership dwarfs his average audience, which tops out at around a couple million views on YouTube. The Trump episode is trending to be one of the show's most viewed episodes ever. It will be the most viewed episode ever. We're going to explain in just a moment what the New York Post might be missing a wee bit. Trump and Rogan even got more eyes than the historically well-watched World Series Game 1 between the Yankees and the Dodgers, which brought in 15.2 million views. Game 1 was the most watched World Series opener since 2017. Now remember, that's just on YouTube. Rogan is primarily on Spotify. That's where the contract is, okay? Joe Rogan Experience's most popular episode ever featured Musk in 2018. That amassed 69 million views in the year since that viral moment. And considering it's Musk, somehow his genius and comedic combined may have resulted in that total. I don't know how he does it, but his vehicles do smell sexy. Model S, Model 3, Model X, and Model Y. By the way, the next model is the number 2. Too sexy. Oh, haha, Tesla. The blockbuster Trump interview was wide-ranging and lasted 3 hours, covering topics like UFOs, deletion attempts, nuclear energy, beached whales, and all matters politics. Now, there's way more that was covered in this, including the claim that the potential future president, if he gets the House and the Senate, that there's a real consideration of getting rid of the income tax completely. Wow. I mean, that is huge breaking news. But here's what I want to say, guys. So what the New York Post is doing is they're pulling the publicly available numbers for this. However, as professional YouTubers, and Derek, you can confirm this, the private numbers that a channel is able to see drastically outperform the public numbers that, for example, the New York Post can see. Okay, so when we're seeing these 20 million, the reality is it's probably closer to 30 million. And oh, by the way, guess what? The public viewership right now is showing 30 million, which means we could be looking at something that's already at 35 to 40 million views. Okay, if we take a look down here, it's currently publicly showing 30. But again, understanding how this works, the real numbers are probably 35 to 40 right now, and that's in less than 48 hours. This is on track to become the biggest Joe Rogan Experience podcast episode of all times. We just told you 69 million is what it would have to break. In 48 hours, it's basically at the halfway mark, and that's just with the publicly available numbers. Now, consider for a moment that this is just YouTube. You've got Spotify as well. You've got the highlight clips, etc. This is going to significantly outpace the total viewership, the total ratings for that big ABC debate that was supposed to be the biggest, baddest, most important, most determining event of the election cycle, part of the dinosaur legacy news media. Joe Rogan, with a 3-hour conversation that only one candidate will do, is now going to destroy the legacy news media. And guys, I believe, Lauren, you and I talked about this. I'll go to you first. I believe this is the way that we should be doing this from here on out. Many, many podcasts all over America, long format conversations. All of our elected officials should have to show that they have the ability to do this. And my, oh my, look how we will be rewarded. Look at the interest. Look at the demand that is here for this, as opposed to being spoon-fed, synthetic, inhuman, highly coordinated, highly, what would you say, manufactured news from the corporate organizations who have vested interests in giving us bits and pieces that don't always align with reality. Lauren, your thoughts?
I agree with you that I think this is a format that should continue to be used going forward. I think I'm less optimistic than you that this is going to be the death knell of the legacy media because they're they have very deep pockets, they have a lot of influence, and the politicians themselves have an interest in not being transparent. I made the mistake years ago of thinking that the internet was going to be the great liberator of information and that there was no way that it could be subverted.
Well, it was for
Basically,
a while.
not as long as you think. Even at the time that I was thinking that, there were discussions about what the federal government was doing for surveillance and wiretapping and things like that. And still, I thought that because the internet was ostensibly decentralized, that it was not going to be easily controlled. And how wrong I was. That's kind of the thing that I have a problem with here is that sure, Rogan's got a commanding audience and he can command a lot of attention. And I think the long format benefits the public. But you still have to rely on the platform that serves up your content to not be compromised themselves. And I think that that is an issue. We need more competition. We need more platforms that are willing to withstand the pressure of the federal government and the moneyed interests if we want information to truly be free.
Well, Lauren, you and I talked about that. I want to bring Derek into this, and he can add some flavor to what you and I have discussed previous on my channel. Derek, what are your thoughts on X, on Elon Musk, and the pressure that it's putting on platforms like Spotify and YouTube to allow this to exist there so that it doesn't all go over to X and become a major political and economic advantage for them?
Oh yeah, Elon buying X was huge for that reason, and that reason alone is what Lauren is saying was true. If all of the corporate legacy media companies have influence over the major social media platforms, then it's all the same. You know, you're getting the same information anyway. But the fact that Elon was able to get X under his control and just made it open, free ground, free speech. Everybody can say what it is that they need to say. That's humongous because now everyone else has to adjust. You know, Elon doesn't have to worry about, oh, I'm not making money on X. You know, I can't afford to, allow all of these folks to have free speech. If people leave X, people leave. But it's you know that it is the most open free speech platform out there. Yeah, there's some limitations to it. Yeah, there's still some, slight censorship, of course, but there is still more free speech on X than what it used to be. And it is still the biggest platform that offers that. So by doing that, now you're going to get a shift in media because look, young people, my generation, we still watch, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and all of that, but young folks don't. Young folks are going to Joe Rogan. Young folks are watching podcasts. They're watching YouTube. They're watching TikTok videos. That's where the younger audiences are. And if those remain open and free, then you're going to start to see not only a shift in the way that, the media covers this, but you're also going to see a shift in the culture and in the politics. So I think that is a very important point that you have to get more politicians doing more of these long form, 3-hour interviews where they're just sitting down and talking to people, normal people like Joe Rogan, just normal guys. He might have his political leanings or his political opinions, but he's just a normal person. And he's not a, CNN, reporter or some pundit on, MSNBC or Fox News even. You got to get down to the ground level with most of these voters. And I think that this is the perfect way to do it. It's just to go on Joe Rogan. Hey, this guy, he speaks to everybody. He speaks to all kinds of different audiences. And, by Trump doing that, I think that helped him a lot. I think it helped him tremendously, along with, the whole situation with him doing the McDonald's thing. Like, that was smart because now he seems like a normal human being, whereas everyone else seems to be, tailored and, manicured and corporate. They don't seem like real people. And unfortunately, we still want to vote for real people that aren't preaching some sort of a message or behind an ideology or an agenda. We want to see ourselves somewhat and I hate saying that because it sounds like what we always speak out against, but people still want to see a normal human being in the Oval Office. So I think Trump helped himself out a lot by doing that.
Well, I think too, you have to consider that if Joe Rogan has 30 million views, and we believe it's more, But if he has 30 million views on YouTube within 48 hours, and if he has, and by the way, it would be right now something like 40 hours, if he has less than that on his main platform, which is Spotify, so let's put it at 20 for easy math. So conservatively, we can now say that Joe Rogan probably has 50 million views on that podcast episode. Okay, so 50 million views in 2 days, really less than that. Guys, what's amazing to me is how close we came to losing any opportunity for this sort of thing. Because if you guys will recall, prior to Musk purchasing X, there was a very strong push to make sure that quote unquote misinformación was not allowed anywhere on the web. And that just happened to be whatever the other side didn't agree with. And that could have been used as a cudgel, by the way, from the other side if power had ever gone in the opposite direction. Now, however, with X and with this, I'm more optimistic. So I understand Lord's concerns. You know, I kind of feel like the caveman who sees fire for the first time, and I'm being told about, you know, all the ways that it can cook food. And I think, yeah, but I see some problems here too. So but I am overall optimistic. I think there's a chance here to get back to free discourse. We need more platforms. We need more shows. We need this to become the mainstream, not the exception. But in terms of this being the first time that I can ever recall, and maybe historically, that the legacy network news, that they don't have the control anymore. Someone else is bigger than they are, and that's big. Guys, final thought on this one?
Yeah, I don't want to discount that it's a big deal, and it is something that should be continued. I think the long-form interview is useful, especially because in 3 hours, it's really hard to hide. It's difficult to be inauthentic when you actually have to fill that time. If you could imagine Kamala Harris trying to sit through while giving non-answers for 3 hours, it would be impossible. She would be entirely exposed. But I think in addition to the long-form interview, like we were talking about in our last video, what you need is also more robust debates. And I would like to see debates not handled by something like the Presidential Debate Commission or the networks. As we said in our last video, something more akin to the Lincoln Douglas debates, where it's also long form, where you're not having cutting off of mics or artificial limits on time for questions, answers, rebuttals, and such. Let them slug it out. Let's actually hear them talk and work on their feet so that we can see, how do these people think? What are their ideas and theories of government? And can they actually get their point across? Are they going to be able to stand up on the world stage and represent us the way that we want to be? And I think that's something you only get when you actually have to have a real substantive debate.
Yeah, sit them at a table, right? Sit them two people at a table sitting across from each other, hand them a topic, and let's have them talk it out and discuss it. That would be awesome. I would love to see, two presidential candidates sitting across the table from one another, just hashing it out. Because guess what? That's what it's going to be like when they're talking to a foreign leader. They're not going to have a moderator sitting there feeding them questions and telling them, okay, now I'm going to cut your mic off if you start talking over the other. No, just straight up, hey, these are two leaders of their respective nations. Get out there and let's hash out these arguments, and that's exactly how, in my opinion, debates should always be. So yeah, I agree 100% with you, Lauren. That would be much better. The Joe Rogan talking to Trump, it's another version of that. It's a little bit different, but it's still very good. I liked it. I think that all politicians should do that. And I think the young people that are growing up on YouTube, they're not watching television. They're not watching cable. They're watching YouTube. I think the young folks that are growing up, they're going to demand that type of discourse to happen more than our generation, because we're older. So I understand that. The younger folks, they're going to be like, look, I'm not going to watch CNN and see what's happening. Oh, Joe Rogan, I'll watch that. And I think the politicians will figure that out, and they'll naturally gravitate towards that.
That's right. And folks, we've tried to keep it nonpartisan. Renegade Online is all about the financial issues of Hollywood. And I'm here to tell you, when it comes to the potential transfer of so much power and viewership regarding the news sections of the scheduling of networks, you were talking about vast sums of money at stake. They do not want this to go to the podcasters, but it could. And that's why Lauren has a great point. They're going to fight like mad to get back in control of this. How will they do it, though, if they also at the same time lose political power? It's something to watch.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.